All right, let's get into this. We got a Friday slate that has 9-gamer. Should be a nice one. Some interesting matchups, some rematches, a couple games that we've already seen, but a couple new ones, a couple unique spots. Miami, Philadelphia should be interesting, as well as Portland, Toronto intrigues me. I think that's going to be kind of fun to watch. Other stuff is just kind of divisional here and there, stuff that we've already seen. So, a lot of spots that are relatively predictable, but some potentially under the radar things. And there's news happening right now. Of course, Malcolm Brogdon just went down, and Milwaukee's on a back-to-back. So we have, and the good news is Brogdon is a quad injury. It's not. I was worried it was a knee or something. I was really going to be worried about him, but it should be a fun slate. So let's get into the studs here. We're going to talk through, of course, all of these players that are above 9K. There's one exception on this slate, and that's just kind of the way that things shake out. All these players above 9K that you're going to kind of want to build around, figure out where you want to allocate, that large amount of money, how you want to invest, in that biggest piece of your lineup. A good starting point for everybody when they figure out where they're going to do that. And at point guard, it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's Russell Westbrook. Obviously, he's got New Orleans, and they are at home, 12-3 on FanDuel, 11-6 on DK. He's averaged 58 in the last 5, 1.57 fantasy points per minute. Unbelievable. That's over his season average, and that bump comes from averaging 31 points, real-life points, in the last 5 games. Now, the peripherals are a little bit down, but of course, you never count him out for a double-double, triple-double situation. I'm going to be honest with you, though, Josh. This line is minus, I think it's a 6-point spread right now. I'm a little bit nervous that New Orleans could get blown out. If they find a way to take Anthony Davis out of this game, it's going to be a struggle for Drew Holiday too. And if Drew Holiday get the Paul George treatment, it's going to be a struggle for those two to get things going. And unless they get some good shooting on the perimeter or Niko Mirotic is in, then we could have. Can you hear my dog?
Your dog it's going nuts.
Yeah, she's really wonderful. I worry that this could be a blowout. Now, of course, Russ at 1.5 fantasy points per minute would have a lot to do with that blowout, so you don't necessarily worry about it. But I think the price could be restrictive, and if you find a stud that you prefer, I wouldn't mind it. Like, I don't mind Giannis. That said, this is one of the best matchups on the slate. This is basically the Suns. This is like, people don't realize how bad New Orleans' defense is. They're second worst in backcourt efficiency allowed, 4th most fantasy points allowed to the point guard on the slate. He had 65 here earlier this year, and they lost that game. Of course, that was with Boogie on the court, which would totally change this game. I mean, Russ versus this team with Boogie is there. He's virtually a lock because you have the offensive need for him. I don't know. I feel like this is in the 50s potentially, and they control this game. So what are your thoughts about the potential for a blowout there?
Oh, I mean, there's obviously potential for a blowout, and, we'll get to this when we talk more about the New Orleans options. Spoiler alert, there's only 2 of them really. And, we just have to really hope that for some reason, New Orleans can just find it within them to stay in this game. So, if you buy into the idea that it could be closer than the now 6.5 point spread implies, I'm all about some Russ because, like you said, I mean, New Orleans is just epically bad on defense. They're just horrific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, part of this New Orleans, though, that Russ's production has to do with the performance of your shooting guard pick, Drew Holiday here, 8,200. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Drew falls below our kind of unofficial threshold of 9K. We've got Victor Oladipo up there at 9K on the dot. I don't hate Oladipo in this game against Charlotte on the road, but as has been discussed, on Twitter, I was in a discussion on Twitter, and he's been just pretty unimpressive as of late, and we're really waiting for his salary to keep dropping a bit more to where it was earlier in the season. 9K is still a little too rich for my blood based on his recent performance. So yeah, Drew Holiday, I mean, like Boogie's out for the season. It's clear that they need somebody to step up as that second option. And it's hard for me to see anybody else being it other than Drew. I just think he's going to give us a really nice ROI for a variety of reasons. First of all, RotoGrinder's Court IQ tool, similar to Fantasy Lab's on-off tool. You can plug in some scenarios of who's on, who's off. I mean, so just simply put, I just took Boogie off the court and Drew's usage spikes massively. It's an 8% jump to 31%. And for those of you who, know kind of the tiers of usage rates, that over 30% is just elite. So that 31% usage rate historically with no Boogie on the court is very impressive. On a per 36 miss, he sees an extra 5.5 field goal attempts, 10.3 real points over his average rate with Boogie off the court. And then, of course, there's no Andre Roberson. And, Andre Roberson was, at the time and still, even without him, being healthy, he's second in the league in defensive real plus minus. So, I mean, that's a huge piece out of the equation. And, you mentioned it before, Sean. I mean, he could definitely get the Paulie George treatment. George is a hell of a defender, but he's not in Roberson's, he's not to the quality of Andre Roberson. He's very good, but Roberson's he's elite. So I just see this as a really easy path to a massive game. I mean, he's just going to get the minutes. He's going to get the usage. I mean, if the game is close, he's going to play 40 minutes. If the game is close, he's going to be, throwing up tons of, shots and getting a lot of peripherals to go with it. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
The immediate thing that I think of is, okay, high usage shooting guard who's taken on a massive offensive burden, Bradley Beal. And Bradley Beal just went out here and put up 47 against against them at the 2. So it can be done. They are still susceptible to the 2. And like you mentioned, Andre Roberson is that impact player. I mean, listen, it is still, according to Fantasy 5x5 in the last 20 games. So you have this mix of Roberson in and out. He was in December, and then he missed in the beginning of January, and then he came back for a week, and then he went down. Terrence Ferguson and Alex Abrinas, Josh Eustace, whatever that mix, they've given up some big performances, and they haven't exactly been, phenomenal stoppers, but they've given up some monster performances. They gave up 60 to Jimmy Butler, 43 to CJ McCollum. They gave up 30 to Bogdan. They gave up, the 47 to Brad Beal. So it is not out of the range of possibilities that, Drew goes out there and puts up 45 like he is so capable of doing. I like it.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
and I think the thing about Depot, I like Depot's matchup on paper. He's just slowing down. He's regressing. He was phenomenal in the beginning of the year. It's just going to take us another week before his price settles down. And there's going to be a slate where his price is down and we like the matchup, and it's just a great night to roster him and get back on them when he's, price normalizes. But he needs to be a little bit closer to that DeMar DeRozan, Bradley Beal range before I start to think about rostering him.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and another thing too, and then we can move on unless you got anything else to say about shooting guard is, I mean, for those of you that have, been following the last couple days, we added to our lineup logic worksheet a tab for big and monster games, courtesy of Fantasy 5x5. Chris, I've praised him heavily lately, and I love the site. One of our partners here at Lineup Logic, his website's amazing. And I love the simplicity of his big game and monster game tool. It's a super simple tool. A big game is a performance allowed where the player reaches a top 10% performance for his standards. And a monster game is a 2 standard deviation performance for that player above his average. The point is that the player's only going to get a big game about 8 times a year and a monster game about 2 times a year. So on the basis of big games, Charlotte's only given up 2 big games to shooting guards this year, which is at the bottom of the league. And OKC, surprisingly, has given up 5. I don't know if that includes any where Roberson wasn't playing, but the fact of the matter is, 2 guards, they've given up 5 big games to point guards, 5 big games to shooting guards. So you have to imagine that he's in a nice spot, with that considered. And again, I mean, can't stress it enough. There's no Andre Roberson.
Yeah, that's really the kicker. You like it for that reason. Moving over to the small forward, I think Giannis might be my favorite on the slate as far as studs go. We'll see how he goes through this game tonight, but I think he's $12K on FanDuel, 10-8 on DraftKings. I like that price a lot on DK. The team offensive rating under Prunty has been insane in the last 3 games. I just don't know if people realize how good they have been from an offensive perspective. A 124, a 115, a 119. And then he personally had 3 net ratings of 27, plus 27, plus 15, and plus 30. An average PIE of 26. That's insane. I mean, anywhere above like 16 with player impact estimate is like really, really good. And Giannis has been off the charts under Prunty. And it really is kind of a damning of Jason Kidd and his inability to make this team actually effective with all their talent. But they're getting New York, who's kind of, struggling. They're falling hard against the shooting guard. They're to the small forward. Second only to Atlanta right now on this slate in efficiency allowed to the 3. It's been a rotating door for them. It's Tim Hardaway Jr., it's Michael Beasley, it's Lance Thomas, it's Doug McDermott, whatever those secondary wing guards behind Courtney Lee are. And nobody really is defensively getting it done. So they're allowing a pretty serious efficiency issue to that position. They're about average to the shooting guard, but they're well above average to the small forward. Now, classify Giannis as a small forward, classify him as a 4. The reason that I like to classify him as a small forward is because his offensive game starts outside in. You're not going to necessarily think him as a traditional power forward. So I think we can classify him as more of a 3 in this situation and understand it's probably going to be Porzingis that guards him, but that wasn't really a problem last year. Last year in March, he smashed this team, went for 32, 13, and 7 with 6 steals and blocks combined. Josh, that's a 60 burger. Easy.
Yeah.
Easy. And I think that we could easily expect a double-double here. They're at home. Yes, it's a back-to-back, but they're at home in this one. So you're going to have no Brogdon. You're going to have no Bledsoe. The offense is going to run through him. He's going to get as many shots as he can. I think it's Giannis all day. And think about the other studs. I mean, right? Are you good with Giannis on a Friday night?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, if you're targeting the Knicks, I mean, the first place you look are at the forward positions. And I mean, he is just in an awesome spot in this game. I mean, I don't really have anything else to add to what you said. I mean, I definitely like him. And, I think that just from usage from a ownership standpoint, I could see him among the studs, Davis, Westbrook, himself, probably not KD or Steph, but the New Orleans game, I mean, I could see him coming in behind those two. And, if you buy into the New Orleans OKC game being a blowout and, max minutes, max potential is taken away from Russ and Brow, and you think that this could be a high pace, highly efficient offensive game between New York and Milwaukee, then yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a spot and a hell of a leverage play.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Speaking of again, New Orleans and OKC, I'm going to throw Anthony Davis out to you guys, and the same thing goes with Drew Holiday. He's going to give us monster usage in minutes. No DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, those guys are going to be relied on to carry this team. I guess, Etwan Moore, I guess if Mirotic plays, for those of you that are listening that you may not have heard yet, I mean, Nico's been traded to New Orleans. I mean, it's not certain as of now at the time of the recording if he's going to play or not. If he doesn't play, forget about it. Anthony Davis is in an amazing spot. Historically this season with no Boogie on the court, Anthony Davis, 62 fantasy points, 33% usage rate, 20 field goal attempts per 36 minutes. And you can couple that with the fact that OKC, when they give up big games, okay, and again, when I say big games, I'm referring to, Fantasy 5x5's big games metric. When they give up big games to power forwards. 30% of their 26 big games, that's 8 big games this year, have gone against power forwards. So, it's 1 out of every 3 times it's going to be against a power forward. So the probability that Anthony Davis, I don't want to say it's a ceiling game because his ceiling is 90 points. But the likelihood that he goes for 60, maybe even 70, I'll go out on a limb and say, if the game stays close, and of course you don't get the dreaded push notification of Anthony Davis is headed to the locker room that we all know and love with our hearts and souls. I could definitely see him, having a massive game. Like I said, we've been saying, this game, the nature of the game is a little concerning. But hey, if that's the narrative you want to take, that it's going to be a offensive, explosion and it could stay close, then, lock him in. That said, he's going to be popular. People are going to gravitate towards him.
Sure.
So, just be prepared for him to be 30% owned in GPPs.
Yeah, I think he'll probably be secondary to. I think he'll be secondary to Russ and Giannis potentially. I always see. You look up and Russ is owned at almost 50% every single time, and with good reason, right? With good reason. But AD is definitely, you mentioned, one of the best pivots on the slate. At the 4, Steven Adams is a tough matchup, but he's definitely got the length to get through him. At center, it's a little thin. You've got Joel Embiid against, you've got Joel Embiid against Miami. I'm not interested. I worry about that. It's 10-5. That's a really high price tag. He almost got to 50 against Brooklyn, but didn't. If you're not putting up 50, 60 burgers against Brooklyn, I'm going to hold against Miami, who's literally at the complete opposite end of the spectrum in defensive efficiency. So I'll go to Dwight versus Indy. On paper, this is a really, really, really great matchup for him. He's still too expensive, kind of $10K on FanDuel, 9.2 on DraftKings. He had 38 points against Indiana, but he had 18 points in the first half, which then he just completely slowed down. It's one of the best center matchups on the slate. The third best, according to the metrics. Massive scoring allowed in the paint. I think the price is an issue, but if you want to be different at center, I think this is a really easy way to do it. I'm not going to rush out to roster him, but he has been very effective. The one thing I will say, and I mentioned this in the top of the show, the return of Cody Zeller probably does mean that we're going to see Dwight closer to 29 minutes. It's too many minutes for Dwight to play. So we're going to start to see his price fall back down and normalize here. So I'm not going to rush to roster him, but I do think he's in an interesting situation. I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up over 40. But that's about it.
Yeah.
Let's move over to the
garage. I just really want to say real quick, just to echo your Dwight Howard sentiment. I look, if you're playing Indy if you're using players against Indy, you have to use bigs. So yeah, Cody Zeller could come back. Frank Kaminsky is going to probably play. The idea that like Dwight Howard can't give you close to over 1.5 fantasy points per minute, perhaps even 2, is honestly for me, like, I think it's a little crazy. Like, Indy gets dominated by centers and power forwards, so I think he's in a smash spot. I love Dwight Howard, but like you said, like, there's some questions about the minutes he's been getting lately, and it's unsustainable.